Hello and welcome back to Automotive Logistics and Supply Chain Live 2020. I'm Richard Logan, event and content producer here at Automotive Logistics. Thanks very much for joining me from around the world. Every so often, individuals and companies are given the opportunity to contribute to society and support others beyond their normal realms. And it's a real credit to those who stand up to do just that in a time of crisis. During the peak of the pandemic in North America, the government and medical sector turned to the automotive industry as demand for equipment and its delivery far outgrew supply. Here with me now is Miguel Tavera, Director of Global Inbound Logistics and Container Design at General Motors, and Dave Dudek, Executive Vice President, Automotive and Tires Lead at Ceva Logistics, to talk us through how they mobilized their workforces, collaborated, created new supply chains, and ultimately delivered when it mattered most. Welcome to both of you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks, Richard. Happy to be here.
Great. So really excited about this unique bonus session. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Miguel, to kick us off and talk us through just exactly how General Motors and Ceva collaborated in this fantastic story.
Perfect. No, thanks a lot, Richard. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And thanks a lot for having us, tell you the story around the supply chain story, really, of what we wanted to refer to as the arsenal of health. You heard a little bit of this in the media, so we kind of like that title to be part of this conversation, because it somehow it was related to the arsenal of democracy when General Motors and other automakers started to produce military equipment during World War II in the 1940s. So we thought that by us, producing ventilators, we would be helping and with that venture. So let me show you a video, which I think kind of encompasses a little bit of what you're going to see here, and it's a good summary that some of our executives actually gave after we finished production of ventilators. So if you can play the video.
As we wrap up and ship our last ventilator of a 30,000 unit production run on behalf of General Motors, on behalf of Ventec, and on behalf of our country, I want to say thank you to our suppliers. I want to say thank you to the engineers. I want to say thank you to everyone that's been involved.
We really knocked it out of the park by getting this done.
It's kind of a bittersweet time now. We're going to transition over. It's a huge success, and we're very proud of what everybody's done here.
On behalf of the entire Ventec team, I'd like to say thank you to General Motors for the opportunity to be part of this amazing project. The speed at which we moved to bring up this plant and produce 80 times what we're able to in our own plant simply was amazing.
4 months ago, we delivered our first units to a hospital in Chicago, and it's been amazing what we've done together since. This is an incredible story of what one team with one mission can do and what we can accomplish when you bring out the best in people to solve problems in a crisis.
We are so deeply grateful to Ventec Life Systems and General Motors. We are so proud to say that many of our patients have been able to wean off the ventilator, beat COVID-19, and return home to their loved ones. On behalf of all of our patients here at Weiss Memorial Hospital, thank you.
All right, no, thanks a lot. Hopefully this video kind of gives you a little bit of a summary of the whole story. So you're going to go to the next slide if you don't mind. Now, I'd like to start this slide with highlighting what is the task, right? So the task was obviously to pivot to produce ventilators from producing cars. Now, obviously that sounds pretty logical, but I think I wanted to highlight a little bit of a context back at the end of March of 2020. So most of us were going through a cold shutdown or a plant shutdown due to the pandemic. So state of Michigan was actually one of the larger states when it comes to infections and the pandemic statistics. So a lot of that was happening. So from a logistics perspective, if you think about it, we were dealing with trucks on the road, we're dealing with ocean containers on the ocean and everything, trying to plan everything so it was properly set up for the startup. At the same time, we wanted to pivot to produce ventilators, so that was kind of the challenging element. So I want to start this slide if you go all the way to the bottom of the slide. So this is something that Phil Keeney said when he was on his way to Seattle with a couple of his engineers. And really, I like this because it encompasses everything the team felt while we were doing some of this. And it reads, have a mindset of what if your parents, your wife, one of your children, or one of your children had this COVID disease and absolutely needed one of these ventilators. How far would you go to get this thing into production, and how fast would you move? And again, I think this is a very inspiring thing because every single element that we did, we all thought it was to save a life. And that was kind of the context and the mantra we used, if you will. So if you start with the last bullet point on this slide, is that from a discussion to production, it only took 3 weeks. So everything you saw in the video, the readiness and everything, it took 3 weeks. And in reality, if you go to the first bullet point, it started with a partnership with Ventec. So GM and Ventec signed a memorandum of understanding, and where both of companies will collaborate in producing ventilators. So then we chose, after some consideration, the plant in Kokomo, Indiana. And some people ask me, so help me understand, how do you move from producing cars to producing ventilators? So it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Well, the good thing is that we had this facility, which is an automotive, so was an automotive electronically assembly plant. And if you think about it, it was very well suited to produce all the circuit boards and all the different elements that are included in the ventilator. So it was a very well set plant to actually do that. But I think the great thing you saw in the video is that how the speed and how fast our manufacturing team, both GM and Ventec, transformed the Kokomo facility, and really virtually overnight from a car component to a ventilator facility, if you will. Then we got the 30,000 ventilators, the 30,000 order ventilators, and this is under the Defense Production Act from the federal government. The contract was awarded, and the whole contract actually was to produce ventilators until the end of August, the last week of August. So that's kind of how we got. And again, up until this point, I just want to highlight, not everything was sequential. So a lot of activities were happening in parallel. So we had a lot of planning to do, a lot of ambiguity, and a lot of elements that we had to figure out. But then I think the sourcing was one element I really wanted to highlight, because our purchasing team really knocked it out of the park, so to speak. So they completed the sourcing in just 72 hours in less than, for majority of the suppliers, and in less than 5 days, most of it was under a contract. So again, we're talking about almost 125, a little bit over 125 suppliers, and we're talking about 200 to 600 parts, depending on the ventilator. But it was challenging in that not everybody was an automotive supplier. Some of them were Ventec suppliers that we actually, because of our partnership, we leveraged our relationship with. But it was a challenging environment, and certainly that was part of the sourcing of a logistics provider. With this case was Ceva. So you go to the next slide. Again, that was the context. So at some point, it had to come over to logistics. So up until now, we were vigilant and not trying to understand the dynamics of the program, just because we knew we had to catch the ball at some point. Again, I'm going to start at the bottom of this page, stating that we were very, very lucky, fortunate, but also a lot of energy was put to ship 100% on time and complete. So we met every single order we said we were going to meet to produce ventilators, and deliver them as well on time and per our agreement. So But again, this was not that easy at the beginning. So all the context I gave you was one of ambiguity, and it was a very manual process if you think about it. And it was not a typical or typical GM operation. So because of that, we said, all right, so who can help us in manage some of this environment that can get it off the ground literally in days, not weeks, not months. So we hired Ceva as part of our lead logistics provider services. Now, there were a lot of reasons why we hired Ceva, but one of them is basically Ceva has been a partner of us for a number of years. So we work very close together. So they understand the flexibility and the speed. They understood the flexibility and speed we needed in this environment. The other element as well is that we needed somebody who had a global reach, but also a domestic footprint. So we could actually mix modes as we needed. And the other element, of course, was the experience in the healthcare environment, because we had zero experience, so we needed some coaching as well, if you will, from a logistics perspective. So then together we designed the whole logistics network, and think of it as a kind of white paper, if you will. Normally, I have a lot of providers probably watching. If you're a provider and you start looking for a service, the first thing you would ask is just give me the lanes, give me the volumes, give me the modes, or what do you want, right? And the great and the interesting part is that a lot of this is where, well, I don't know, but we have to figure out together as we go. So that's how the logistics network was set up, and we kind of fixed it as we went, if you will. The challenging parts, I said, it was onboarding 125 suppliers. Most of them were in the tier 1, although we ended up just collaborating with tier 2, tier 3, even tier 4 suppliers just to accelerate not only the startup, but the everyday deliveries, if you will. And then our packaging team as well did a fantastic job. We had a special challenge from the government that we needed to have 2 ventilators in a skid, and we had only 24 hours to turn it around. So our packaging team did a fantastic job in designing how we needed to ship it. The government agency, in this case FEMA, was extremely happy with it, and that's how we went. So, and then finally, the outbound network. The outbound network was probably not as complicated as the inbound network was, but it was something entirely new. Again, Ceva helped us as well on this environment, but it was extremely complicated in the sense that we didn't know the fulfillment processes that we were going to go into. We didn't know how the orders would drop. We didn't know the documentation and all different things that are a little bit more related to a healthcare environment. So, but at the end of the day, it worked. Very, very happy at how it turned around. A lot of nights and a lot of late nights, early mornings, however you want to call it, depending if you're in Asia or here. So, but it was a very intense process from a logistics point of view. Now, if you go to the last slide that I have here before I turn it over to Dave, I want to highlight what are the keys to success. And probably I would say 2, the one team, one goal approach. As I said at the beginning, the one goal for us was beyond performing the job. That's how we saw that, right? So think about it again. We were also part of the context where we're going into a working from home environment. So we had a lot of challenges, but we really had that goal in mind that we wanted to save lives, if you will. So our functional leaders and us as functional leaders try to facilitate the work as much as we could, the governance all the way up to the high levels in the organization, and actually the facilitating environment that really our leaders came up and helped us, helped the working team on it was fantastic. I put the extended organization because the extended organization, I refer to some other support functions like HR, IT, or some other functions that we even had an IT person working with us and setting up the outbound process in location. So, I mean, all of us wore a lot of different hats, and obviously our partners, and as the video highlighted, many different thank yous to every single one of our partners, both direct material suppliers and logistics providers. Again, we're talking about the LLP relationship with Ceva, but we had a lot more suppliers also that helped us in making this happen. So a big thank you to do this. And really the team, I can just speak about this personally. My team and our team in logistics and supply chain did a fantastic job. So a lot of kudos for them, to them as well. But we learned a couple of things. So I hope to highlight just a few things. One is that, yes, GM can actually have a startup mindset. So we actually did everything in 3 weeks. So we also thought about there's always a better way, right? So if you think always our processes, we love our processes and everything. So we had to change a lot of them in order to make some of this thing a little bit faster. Now, the other thing also that I think we learned is that in many ways we said we have this process where I throw it out the window and start from zero. And that's, I think, one of the elements of success as well, given the manual nature of our environment. And one big element that we really want to do is to reapply some of these learnings. What did we do right? What did we do right for future programs, if you will? So anyway, so all in all, a great experience. And again, we couldn't do this without strong partners like Ceva. And I'm going to turn it over to Dave so he can explain how he helped us here perform this. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. So I guess I'll give a little bit of the supply chain story from the Ceva side. And, you know, as Miguel mentioned, GM reached out to us. It really was on March 21st, a Saturday, and they gave us a very brief update on this program, what they're looking for, and asked would we be interested in engaging in this. And so we had a couple quick calls on the weekend, pulled together, as Miguel mentioned, team members from our healthcare medical device is subsector, and many of the team that's worked with GM around the world. And really, we put together a bit of a proposal on how we would manage this. GM gave us some more details, and then basically the next day, the Sunday, we gave our commitment from our CEO, our senior management, that we can do this, and a high-level plan of how we would do this without knowing all the details. And that was a Sunday. So the next day, basically March 23rd, GM gave us a formal contract and awarded us the business, which is the fastest I've seen in my career from basically a big program and being given the opportunity to quote on it and then be awarded it. So. And then we moved. The next day we had functional teams in place, both from Ceva and from GM, and got to action. So I think if we could show maybe the next slide in the deck, I think our challenge then was really on managing the complexity, you know, and some of these figures Miguel already mentioned, and these weren't known at the very start. So we came to learn them after some days and weeks. But over 500 part numbers, 125 part suppliers, again, multiple tiered suppliers in some instances. These suppliers in 135 origin cities. We actually had suppliers in 12 origin countries, many in Asia, but also we had Europe with Switzerland. We had the Honduras, Mexico, Canada. So that all led to complexity because this is all happening during COVID. And as mentioned on the outbound logistics, we had 22 destination cities. So some of these were delivery points for the government, others were to hospitals. So that's the complexity that we needed to manage, and had to really pull together the plan in a short amount of time. And again, as mentioned, it was all manual. Most of these suppliers were not automotive suppliers. Our normal automotive business, we have a nice, strong connection to GM's ERP system. They give us a 16-week forecast, and they give us and the supplier the schedule. They ship, we manage it. This was quite unknown, and we had to then involve our supply chain teams around the world in our Asian in Singapore, our Houston and our UK control towers, to engage with these suppliers and basically educate them on how they're going to receive the shipping order, how they're going to then communicate back with Ceva. We then provided them a daily shipping plan, which was tied to, in many instances, the mode of transportation, and so for overseas it was the plane schedule, and then we backed up when the documents were due, when we would have to have the booking in place, and the actual pickup. So that was all put in place, and we were really managing this with Excel, Google Docs, and emails and phone calls at the start. In parallel, we put our system in place in a few weeks, so we were able to then extend that and give the visibility. But at the beginning, we had a lot of that manual complexity. But the exciting thing is everyone was so positive to work with and helping each other through everything. And you know, at the start, I know our team used to call it, we had a morning breakfast call with GM to really go through you know, what took place in the last few hours. And sometimes we had 20-hour days working on this across weekends, across holidays, to really move this. So you know, really tied at the hip, I think was a huge success story in moving this forward. I think if we go to the next slide, you know, we also assisted GM with you know, some of the understanding, as I mentioned, on the importation side of these goods, as they weren't automotive and were regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. So I had to work on how to make sure we could do those importations. And then as we're really working on the logistics, we had changing rules with the exportation of relief cargo in some instances, as well as obviously interesting border controls. You know, we had shutdowns in some countries happening, so that's all made it you know, quite a challenge to manage through. But we did work through that, and I think, you know, we had some quite interesting startup issues. I was involved in one where we had a border truck here in Hong Kong that got stopped because of some of the new regulations to do physical inspection, and we actually had to have the supplier come to the border and explain the documentation with what was on the packaging to get that actually then approved to cross the border to catch a flight. So those were some things that we just worked minute to minute in dealing with. We had another interesting, I guess, example where we had 2 tier 2s we were managing, one from Switzerland, one from India, to try and move them together to get to a tier 1 to do the final component consolidation and manufacturing of a certain part. And those suppliers were hand to mouth. So we were literally looking for the next available flights. And in the India instance, we actually had to do a domestic hand carry after we got through the border to the final destination. And then once the goods were made, we needed to get them to Kokomo. And I can say on the last weekend, as we were working on the final numbers to get to Kokomo and then to the final delivery, we had some major storms that blocked some of our air shipments, and Miguel and myself were on calls every 15 minutes watching the storms and waiting for us to be able to wheels up the aircraft and then communicate with our supply chain partners to put things in place for when the planes came through Anchorage down to Chicago, and then expedite to Kokomo for final assembly and then delivery. So those were just some examples of the interesting times we had. But as we said, we worked together as a team and got through everything, and it was quite a success. think if we go to the next slide, so that was the goal, was 30,000 as ventilators. I think, as Miguel said, everyone was quite excited to deliver that. You can see the board here. We really finished just in time, and it was a bit tight. And I kind of felt it was even maybe 5 times more pressure than a plant shutdown situation that I know many people on this conference have been in. But it was all professional. How can we help? What can we do next to make sure that we achieve this goal? And we did it. And then, I think the nice thing from our perspective, from Ceva's perspective, we've had a major supplier advise, they had never seen that type of responsiveness in their logistics provider, and we were able on a Friday to get an order, move their tier 2 on the week and have it delivered on a Sunday, and they're now our customer. And even Ventec is a customer of ours now. Unfortunately, not under my control. They're in our healthcare organization, which makes sense. But I think that they were quite impressed with how we worked with GM and themselves to complete this project. And I guess from a personal perspective, I'm from Detroit. I grew up there. I was watching COVID and how it's affecting my friends and families, let's say. And the interesting thing is I told my parents a little bit about we're working on this project, and my parents have never been excited to talk automotive logistics with me, but they were excited to learn how we're working with GM on this project. And that was quite exciting to see them engaged. I think if we go to the next slide, I think really the most rewarding thing, and this is exactly what Miguel said, was how these ventilators save lives. And this was a news article in the Detroit News. This gentleman on May 11th was admitted to the Weiss Memorial Hospital, Jeff Dickinson, and the intensive care unit was full. They had run out of their ventilators and actually put him on a GM ventilator. And he basically said, I couldn't walk, I couldn't breathe. I was given this ventilator and it really saved my life. And I mean, that was just, the most rewarding moment, right, I've had to read that and be a part of that. So, this was demanding, interesting, exciting, really the most satisfying project I've ever worked on personally. And I know my colleagues that worked on this, have all said that. In fact, we need to have a bit of a celebration when we can travel again together. But we're really proud that GM selected us to be a part of this. And I think it's a tribute to the automotive supply chain and be able to pull something like this off. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Richard. Not sure if we have any time for questions.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thanks, Miguel. Really fascinating, really inspirational, and great to see the true power of collaboration and supply chain's finest putting its minds together there. We are moments away from our next session, but I did want to squeeze in 1 or 2 questions of my own, if I may. So, Miguel, if I start with you, looking at the pace of the way the supply chain was put together, has this created a new precedent for General Motors? Is this going to shape the automotive supply chains moving forward? Does it change what you're doing at GM?
I think that's a pretty good question. It will definitely help. All the learnings we got out of this, it'll help. The networks are entirely different. The situations are entirely different. The automotive environment, as you know, is entirely different as well. But it definitely helps with all the learnings to get our network designs probably a little bit more agile, if you will, right? So we're talking about a situation in a domestic environment a long time ago, how we can learn from how we reacted in working with suppliers pretty fast from a logistics perspective. So the question is, can we reapply that in the domestic environment? in a day-to-day basis, for example, right? So yes, there's a lot of potential learnings. I think it'll improve some of the things of the initiatives that GM's been working on, certainly. I wouldn't just go as far as to say to reshape it, but definitely would influence.
Yeah, great, fantastic. And Dave, maybe one quick question for you is: I know supply chain professionals and logisticians, they can't help themselves but optimize routes and flows. Again, this was created at pace. Was the design different at the end? Was the network design, the flows, the routes different at the end of the project compared to when it started? How much optimization and how much change did you see through the project?
I guess there were some yes and no's, right? So certain areas, where we didn't need, let's say, we weren't as hand to mouth with the requirements and the velocity needed. We were able to do different mode changes, different routings. So it did change in some instances, but then other times, we had to use the most expeditious manner. So it was very dynamic and something that we were balancing as best we can to the requirements.
Great, thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're out of time for this session. Perhaps opportunities to follow up in the networking on the Brella platform with the two of yourselves and your colleagues as well about this fascinating project. So thank you once again for sharing that and being with us here today.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Miguel.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys. And to our audience, stick around, because coming right up, we've got our next session lined up with Juan Quintana, Chief Strategy Officer for Hyperloop Technologies, a really exciting new mobility company. And that interview is coming right up after this. So stick around and enjoy. Thank you.